The hall was silent, except for the ticking of a wall clock that sounded louder than gunfire. Captain Samuel Harlan stood before the panel, his uniform immaculate, his face drawn tight beneath the weight of memory. They called him a hero, yet every word felt like a lie carved in brass. Colonel Rutledge read from a citation filled with courage and valor, but behind Harlan's eyes flickered fire, screams, and snow. Why would a man refuse the nation's highest honor? And what sin lay buried beneath the ruins of Aachen that even glory could not cleanse? Outside, winter sunlight bled through the window, cold and pale, as if heaven itself refused to look. The air in the tribunal turned heavy, as though every breath carried judgment. Harlan's voice broke the silence, calm yet trembling. He said he could not accept what was built on a lie. The officers shifted uneasily. Rutledge's jaw clenched. Outside, snow began to fall over the parade ground, white flakes covering footprints of marching men. In that quiet drift, Harlan's confession began not to the panel but to himself. Every word felt like opening an old wound, one that never healed because it never truly closed. In the flash of his mind, Aachen reappeared. The ruins, the cries, the impossible orders. Smoke turned the air into a living ghost. He remembered the church, its bell tower half collapsed, and the civilians who ran for shelter inside. Command had said it was an enemy stronghold. Harlan had given the order. Then came the gunfire, the screams, the silence. He could still hear the echo of it, clinging to his soul like soot that no water could wash away. When the memory faded, Harlan found his hands shaking. The metal still gleamed before him, like temptation wrapped in gold. Rutledge asked why he refused, and Harlan simply said, because it wasn't courage, it was fear. The colonel blinked, unsure how to respond. For the first time, even the clock seemed to stop. No one moved. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and soundless, covering the old and the damned alike. When the session adjourned, Harlan stepped outside into the snow. Each flake melted against his skin, turning the world into quiet gray. Elias waited by the steps, eyes wide and uncertain. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Harlan said softly, "Heroes don't need medals. They just need to live with what's left." He walked into the white silence, leaving footprints that vanished almost as soon as they were made. The memory took shape in color and sound. Aachen, December 1944. The air stank of smoke and metal. Captain Samuel Harlan led his men through a street that no longer belonged to anyone. The buildings were hollowed-out shells, the sky a low ceiling of ash. They were told civilians had fled, but Harlan could see small faces in windows, the glint of movement in the rubble. Colonel Rutledge's radio voice hissed through the static, "Clear every structure, no risks." Those words, so clean in a briefing, became filth when mixed with fear and fire. Every sound mattered now. The crunch of boots, the creak of distant metal. Elias whispered, "Sir, there are still people here." Harlan didn't answer. Orders were orders, but his gut burned. Through the drifting snow, he saw the steeple of a half-collapsed church, a white cross bent like it was bowing to death itself. "That's our next position," he said quietly, but even his own voice sounded hollow. When they reached the churchyard, silence turned hostile. Then came a shot from somewhere unseen. A bullet struck the wall near Harlan's head, spraying stone. Instinct shouted louder than thought. His men returned fire. The church doors burst open. Screams mixed with gunfire. Through the chaos, Harlan saw a woman in white, a nurse clutching a child, not a weapon. But by the time his voice reached them, it was too late. The shooting stopped, leaving only echoes and the smell of burning wood. Harlan stepped inside, his boots crushing broken hymnals. His men stood silent among the pews, faces pale, eyes down. A small body lay near the altar. He knelt beside it, trembling, Outside, Elias leaned against a wall, gasping for air, muttering prayers he didn't believe. Snow drifted through the shattered ceiling, melting into blood. When the smoke cleared, radio static filled the air again. "Report complete," Rutledge's voice commanded. Harlan stared at the receiver but said nothing. Around him, silence had shape and weight. He looked at Clara Weiss, the nurse, kneeling beside the child, tears streaking her ash-covered face. She whispered in German, words Harlan couldn't understand but felt anyway. They weren't curses. They were goodbyes. The war did not end that day, but something inside Captain Samuel Harlan did. The echo of that gunfire chased him through every ruined street. When night came, he sat alone outside the church, staring at the frozen sky. From inside, he heard the soft murmurs of Clara Weiss tending the wounded, enemy and ally alike. He had once believed he understood duty. Now it tasted like rust in his mouth. The world felt hollow. Every victory a wound that refused to clot. And yet, beneath that silence, he heard the faint sobs of a woman who still believed life could be saved in a place where everything else was burning. He rose at dawn and entered the church again. The fires had died, replaced by the stench of ash and medicine. Clara stood near the altar, wrapping the arm of a wounded soldier. German, no older than 16, her hands did not tremble. When she looked up, her blue eyes were calm but distant. "You came back," she said quietly. Harlan nodded, unable to meet her gaze. Between them lay the broken hymn book and the child's blood, frozen into the floor. They spoke little, and what they said came out like breath in winter. Fragile, fading quickly. Claire told him she had stayed to care for whoever remained, soldier or civilian. It made no difference now. Harlan watched her, realizing how thin the line was between mercy and defiance. "You shouldn't be here," he said. She looked at him, her eyes fierce through exhaustion. "Neither should you." The words cut sharper than any bullet. By midday, the snow outside had deepened. Elias entered the church, carrying canteens and trembling with cold. His face looked younger than ever. "Sir, headquarters is asking for a report," he muttered. Harlan didn't answer at first. Instead, he looked around. The faces of the wounded, the scattered hymns, Clara's quiet persistence. Then he spoke, almost whispering. "Tell them we found nothing." Elias hesitated, eyes darting to the German boy and back. Harlan's tone left no room for argument. For the first time, Elias disobeyed fear and obeyed mercy. That night, Harlan sat beside the dying fire, staring into the flicker of embers. Clara approached, carrying a blanket for the wounded. She paused near him, her eyes soft with exhaustion. "Do you believe in forgiveness?" she asked. Harlan didn't look up. Not for men like me. She knelt beside him, resting the blanket over his shoulders. "Then believe in kindness," she said quietly. The fire crackled between them, its glow painting the broken walls gold. For a brief moment, the war seemed far away, like a bad dream, waiting for morning to end it. The church grew colder as the days passed. Harlan stopped keeping count. The dead had been buried in shallow graves behind the rectory, their names whispered like prayers to no one. Father Keller appeared one morning, walking through the snow with a limp and a black coat frayed by war. He found Harlan sitting alone by the altar, head bowed. "You carry a weight, not meant for one man," the priest said. Harlan looked up, eyes hollow. "Then who should?" The question hung in the air like frost that refused to melt. The priest listened without judgment. Harlan spoke quietly, as though afraid the walls might hear. He told of the orders, the confusion, the shots that struck before he could stop them. He confessed the lie he had sent back to command, that there had been no civilians. Father Keller's face did not change. He only asked, "Do you regret the killing, or the silence that followed?" Harlan couldn't answer. His breath caught in his throat, and for the first time, his eyes filled. Outside, Clara tended the wounded, unaware that confession was taking place inside the sanctuary. She hummed softly, to the tune of an old hymn, her voice trembling from exhaustion. Elias watched her quietly, unable to find words. "He shouldn't blame himself," she said softly. Elias looked down. He gave the order. Clara turned toward him, her blue eyes fierce. "And who gave it to him?" The question left Elias silent, realizing that blame was just another weapon men carried home. When Clara entered the church later that evening, she saw Harlan still kneeling before the priest. His hands were clasped tightly, knuckles white, his face lowered in shame. She hesitated by the doorway, then stepped closer. Father Keller rose slowly, nodding to her as he left. For a long moment she said nothing. Then softly, "I lost my sister in Dresden. She was only 12. Harlan looked up, guilt heavy in his stare. "I'm sorry." Clara shook her head. "You didn't kill her. The war did." Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. Before dawn, the priest prepared to leave for another village. Harlan walked with him to the church door, their breath clouding in the frigid air. Father Keller turned once more, placing a hand on Harlan's shoulder. "When this is over, you will be asked to forget," he said. "Don't. Remembering is the only way to keep from becoming what you fear." Harlan nodded, though his eyes held no peace. As the priest disappeared into the snow, the faint sound of church bells carried across the ruins, broken notes still daring to ring. When the war finally ended, Captain Samuel Harlan went home to Tennessee. The air there smelled of rain and pine instead of gunpowder. Yet peace felt stranger than battle. The town greeted him with banners and cheers, proud of their local hero. He smiled when expected, but the sound of applause made his stomach turn. People spoke of victory, of glory, of the medal that was sure to come. No one asked what he had lost to earn it. Each handshake felt heavier than his rifle ever had. And when night came, the only thing that kept him awake was the silence of those who couldn't return. Home had changed, or maybe he had. His mother's farmhouse sat quiet among the hills, the fields unplowed since he left. Inside, the air carried the smell of coffee and time. He found his father's old Bible still open on the table, the page marked by a folded photograph of him in uniform. The sight made his throat tight. He wanted to feel something, gratitude, peace, anything. But all he felt was distance, as if he'd never truly come back. The ghosts he brought with him filled every corner the moment he crossed the threshold. A week later, Elias Monroe came to visit. The boy was thinner now, shoulders slouched beneath his civilian coat. They sat on the porch without speaking for a long time. Finally, Elias said, "They're giving you the Medal of Honor." Harlan didn't look up. "They shouldn't." The wind moved softly through the tall grass. Elias nodded slowly. "I told them you saved us." Harlan's eyes lifted then, tired, haunted but gentle. "No, son," he said quietly. "I only made sure we lived through it." As months passed, the town honored him again. The mayor spoke proudly, calling him a symbol of courage. Harlan stood on the courthouse steps, dressed in a clean uniform, feeling the same cold dread he'd felt in the tribunal. Faces blurred in the crowd, cheering, waving, smiling. But among them, he thought he saw Clara Weiss, or maybe only the memory of her, eyes soft with forgiveness. When the speech ended, someone handed him a metal-shaped box. He held it, then quietly set it down on the stone railing. Applause filled the air. But he was already walking away. That night, he went to the edge of the field behind the farmhouse. The stars were sharp and countless, like glass scattered across the heavens. He removed the metal box from his coat and opened it. The gold shone faintly in the starlight. For a long while, he just stared, remembering the faces in Aachen, the nurse, the child, the priest. Then he closed the box and buried it beneath a sycamore tree. "Stay there," he murmured. voice barely audible. "You belong with the dead." The wind carried his words into the darkness, soft and final. The letter came years later, sealed with the crest of the U.S. Army. It summoned Captain Samuel Harlan back to Washington to receive the Medal of Honor he had once refused. His hair had gone gray at the temples now, his face leaner, the weight of time carved into every line. He packed no uniform, only a plain suit and a worn photograph of his unit. The train ride east was silent except for the rhythm of steel on steel, each sound echoing the steps of ghosts that followed him still. When he arrived, the capital felt foreign, too bright, too clean. The marble steps of the War Department shone white under the morning sun. Young soldiers in crisp uniforms saluted him as he passed, not knowing who he truly was beneath the legend they'd been told. In the reflection of the glass doors, he saw both versions of himself, the man they honored and the man who'd never forgiven his own orders. Inside the tribunal hall, time folded back. The same long table, the same heavy curtains, only the faces had changed. New officers, young and confident, unscarred by what came before. They spoke of valor, of honor, of sacrifice. When Harlan was called forward, his hands trembled slightly. He looked around the room and felt the air tighten, as if the ghosts of Aachen had followed him through the door. His throat was dry, but his voice, when it came, was steady. "You don't give medals for what I did." He told them everything. The civilians, the confusion, the shot that began it all, the lie that followed. His voice broke only once when he spoke the nurse's name. The officers sat motionless, the myth of their ceremony unraveling word by word. Silence filled the hall when he finished. One man finally asked, "Then why did you come here today?" Harlan looked up, eyes clear for the first time in years, because truth deserves a witness. When it was over, Harlan walked out into the cold air. No applause followed, no camera flashes, only the quiet scrape of his shoes on stone. Snow had begun to fall again, just as it had in Aachen. He paused on the steps, looking toward the horizon. Somewhere in Germany, the ruins had turned to gardens, the wounds of war buried under time. He took a deep breath and let the snow settle in his hair. At last, the weight began to lift. Not through forgiveness, but through truth finally spoken aloud. Years passed quietly after the tribunal. Captain Samuel Harlan never returned to the city. He bought a small cabin in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains, where mist rolled through the pines like drifting memory. He chopped wood, fed the fire, and watched the seasons turn without ceremony. His hands grew rough again, useful, honest. Sometimes, when the wind moved through the trees just right, he thought he heard distant bells, faint echoes of Aachen carried on the air. The world no longer called him a hero. That suited him just fine. One autumn morning, a letter arrived. Yellowed paper, postmarked from Germany. The handwriting was neat and careful, the kind born from someone who had seen too much and chosen gentleness anyway. It was from Clara Weiss. Her words were brief. She had survived, returned to her village, and worked as a nurse in the years after the war. "You once asked if forgiveness exists," she wrote. "It does, but it must be chosen every day, by both the guilty and the grieving." Harlan read it twice before setting it down beside his coffee cup, the steam curling upward like prayer. That evening, Harlan stepped outside and looked toward the horizon. The sun bled red across the hills, the same shade he remembered from the fires of Aachen. But now it carried warmth instead of ruin. He thought of Clara's words, of Father Keller's voice telling him to remember. Memory, he realized, wasn't punishment. It was proof of mercy's endurance. He closed his eyes and listened to the crickets, the wind, the crackle of his hearth through the open door. The war had ended long ago, but peace, real peace, had taken its time finding him. Winter came again, soft and silent. One morning, fresh snow blanketed the cabin steps. Harlan walked down to the field where the sycamore tree stood tall and bare. Beneath it lay the medal he had buried years before. He brushed the snow aside and unearthed the small wooden box. Inside, the ribbon had faded, the metal dulled with rust. He smiled faintly, then tossed it into the fire he'd built nearby. Flames licked the metal, gold turning red, red turning to ash. "No one wins a war," he whispered. "But some learn how to live after it." As night fell, Harlan sat by the fire inside his cabin, the last embers glowing soft and steady. On the table lay Clara's letter, worn at the folds. He read it once more before tucking it inside the old Bible his father had left him. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees, carrying with it the hush of snow and faraway bells. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closing. For the first time in decades, his heart was quiet. Somewhere beyond the mountains, dawn would come again, and the world would keep turning, gentler for the mercy left behind.